Going home. One day, Nicola decided to ask Kublai Khan about going home, but the Khan was immediately worried and said no. He then began to ask Nicola a lot of questions. Why did the Polos want to go home? Why did they want to go on a dangerous journey again? Did they not want to stay with him? So, the Polos continued their usual life at the Khan's court. But one day, news arrived from Arghun, the ruler of the Mongol Empire in Persia. He was the grandson of Kublai Khan's brother. Arghun's wife was dead, and he wanted to marry again, but his new wife had to be from the most important Mongol family. So Kublai Khan said that Arghun could marry a beautiful young princess from his court, a 17-year-old girl called Kukachin. At first, Kukachin began her journey to meet Arghun with 3% ambassadors, but they turned back because of terrible fighting on the road. Back at the Mongol court, the 3% ambassadors secretly met the Polos. They needed to take Kukachin to Persia soon, and perhaps these 3 famous travelers could go with them. The Polos were, of course, very pleased with his plan, and they talked to the Khan about it. In the end, he agreed. He also said the Polos could visit their families in Venice, but after that they had to return to see him. The Khan again gave the man gold passports and bags of valuable jewels as presents. In 1292, the group sailed from the city of Zayton in 14 huge ships full of food and drink for the long journey. There were hundreds of sailors, servants, and passengers on each ship. The ships stopped at a number of places, for example, the islands of Java, Sumatra, and Sri Lanka, and also parts of India. But it was not easy traveling by sea. In Java, they had to stop for months because of heavy rain, and on the 2-year journey, 600 passengers died from accident, storms, or bad food. 2 of those 600 dead were the Persians' ambassadors. The Polos, Kokachin, and the last Persian ambassador arrived in Hormuz, but messengers from Persia soon brought bad news. Arghun was now dead. The ambassador and the Polos quickly spoke to the Persian messengers, and they decided on a new plan. Kokachin could now marry Arghun's son Kazan. So Nicola, Maffei, and Marco took the princess up to the city of Kerman to meet her new husband. Kokachin cried when the Polos left her. After a long journey together with many adventures, they were now good friends. The Poles began to turn home, but they soon had more bad news. Kublai Khan was dead. Oh my god. With his death, the great Mongol Empire stopped being so important, and for the Poles, this was the end of their journeys to China. Months later, Nicola, Maffeo, and Marco arrived safely back in Venice. It was 24 years since they last fled, but did their friends and the family still remember them? The travelers return. When Marco Polo first left Venice, he was only a boy of 15. It was now the year 1295, and he was a man of 39. Over the years, there have been many different stories about his return to the city. In one story, Nicola, Maffeo, and Marco arrived at the family home in Venice. A servant opened the door, but she didn't ask the man to come in. They looked strange in their old Mongol clothes, and it was difficult to understand them when they spoke Italian again after all those years. In the end, the travelers went into the house, but their families didn't look interested or excited to see them again. Perhaps they did not think that these men were really Nicola, Maffeo, and Marco. Of course, they were now much older than they did not look like successful merchants. This picture, Marco's home, was here. Later, the three men had a large meal with everybody in their family. At the end of the evening, they put on their old Mongol clothes again. Then they took out big knives and began to cut open their coats. Suddenly, hundreds of jewels fell to the floor. Some were presents from the Khan, and the others were jewels from years of trade. Everybody understood at once these men were Nicola, Maffeo, and Marco, and they were now very rich. We don't know much about the later years of Marco Polo's life, but we know one important thing. In 1298, at the age of 44, he fought for Venice against the city of Genoa. Genoa. The two cities were fighting about trade routes in the Mediterranean Sea, but soldiers from Genoa caught Marco and put him in prison. Marco then sent a message to his father in Venice. He asked for some books to write notes in, and this son arrived. One of the other prisoners in Genoa was a man called Rustichello of Pisa. He was a writer and a teller of exciting stories. During their long hours in prison, Marco told Rustichello about his journey to China, and Rustichello noted it all down in French. But he didn't only write down Marco's words. He put in one or two of his own ideas too. So some people think that some pieces in the middle of Marco's careful descriptions are by Rustichello. This man, Marco and Rustichello in prison. A picture from description of the world. When Marco returned to Venice, he took their notes with him, and this became the description of the world. People soon translated that book into Italian, and it became famous. Priests, rich men, and students all read it. In 1300, Marco married a woman called Donata Badoer, the daughter of a rich merchant, and they had three girls, Fantina, Belella, and Moreta. He also continued to work as a merchant in Venice, but he never traveled again. After the description of the world became famous, some people began to call Marco Il Million because they thought that his book had a million things in it that were not true. But Marco always said that everything in his stories was real. Just before Marco Polo died in 1324 at the age of 70, some of his friends spoke to him. They wanted him to tell them about his book before he died. Was everything in there true? But Marco was very sure about his stories, and he said to his friends, I have only told the half of what I saw. After Marco Polo. In the centuries of after Marco Polo's death, his book became more famous. People translated the description of the world into English, Latin, German, and other languages. We still have 119 of these early books, and they are all different. Many of them have pages of beautiful pictures, but the artists didn't always read Marcus' descriptions very carefully, and the pictures sometimes show strange and unusual animals, like this. In the 14th and the 15th century, the book gave people in Europe the best description of the countries of the East at this time. Marco Polo opened up the world for many readers, and he helped them to see into the daily lives of people far away. The book was also very important because of his wonderful descriptions of the Mongol Empire and his window into the life of Kublai Khan. No later travelers could ever write a book like the description of the world. When Kublai Khan died in 1294 and his empire began to fall, it was no longer possible for Europeans to journey along the Silk Road to the east. Marco Polo wrote about new things for Europeans at this time too. He described making silk and using gunpowder. Through him, they also learned about rhinoceroses, paper money, and the fast messengers of the Mongol Empire. And of course, Marco also took news about life in Europe to China, and he explained it to the Han about the Pope and the Christian religion. The description of the world was a useful book as well as an interesting one. Merchants later read all about the markets on the Silk Road, and they learned from Marco about the best goods to buy and sell in different cities. In the next centuries, map makers in Spain and Italy also carefully read Marco's book. They put a lot of the place from his descriptions onto their new maps for travelers, traders, and the sailors. We know that one famous sailor from Genoa later read the description of the world, and we still have this book today with his notes all over it. This man was very interested in Marco's exciting stories of Sipangu, Japan, and all the gold there. He wanted to open up a trade route to Japan for European merchants. And what was this sailor's name? Christopher Columbus. He began to sail west around the world because he wanted to arrive in Japan from the east. He didn't find the islands of Japan, of course, but that is a different story. Yes, that's all. This glossary. Thank you for watching, guys. Support my channel. Thank you.